Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruin. We are back again with another special guest. You've seen him all around New England and beyond. He is a wrestling manager extraordinaire. He's been commissioner. He's done it all. He's done all different things in the wrestling world and beyond. Like I mentioned, he is the guardian of chaos. New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Famer class of 2019. Big Daddy, welcome to the show.
Joe, thanks for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Pleasure to have you here, and looking forward to this. So I'm happy to sit down with you and kind of take a little deep dive. I've seen some interviews with you in the past, but I've never had the opportunity to sit with you and chat about the wrestling business on camera. So looking forward to this.
Thank you, Joe.
So rewinding to the very beginning, like I always do, growing up as a child, when did you first discover pro wrestling? Who were some of your favorites? I know when you first got in, you maybe weren't always planning on entering the wrestling business, but as far as a fan point of view, when did you actually become a fan?
As a fan, Joe, my earliest memories go back to 1971, 1972. And that was mainly the WWF, because I grew up in the shadows of Titan Towers. So as a 7-year-old kid, 8-year-old kid, Bruno Sammartino, Pedro Morales, Ivan Koloff, Captain Louis Albano, the old WWF. I used to have to watch it on midnights on WOR-TV out in New York. Even in the earlier years in the 70s, WWF was actually on HBO. So I ended up watching those videos there. And of course, my father would coach me along, and he wasn't a big wrestling fan. Neither one of my older brothers were big wrestling fans. But from the time as a young boy, I was mesmerized by pro wrestling. Good guys, bad guys. I would have to lean more towards the heels, with the exception of Bruno. I mean, Bruno was my #1 all-time favorite. If I'm not mistaken, one of my very first matches that I saw, was it still in Bruno's first run in the early 70s, and then he ended up losing to Koloff, who lost to Morales, and Stan Stasiak, you could throw him in there at one point, and then Bruno got the title back. By then I'm already a teenager. So those are my earliest memories. I go back like a recliner, Joe. I go back like 8 tracks.
Now, when it comes to pro wrestling, when did you actually first go see it live and in person for the first time?
Good question. I got to really go back, Joe. So it was in the 1970s. I'm pretty sure the venue was the New Haven Coliseum, maybe even the old New Haven Arena. And I can remember the grapplers that were on their card, because it was Bruno Sammartino, Stan the Man Stasiak, Tor Kamada. I'll never forget, as a kid, as Stan Stasiak walked by in the Coliseum, I think it was the Coliseum at that point, I went to shake hands and touch him on the shoulder because I'm at ringside, and I got to shake Stasiak's hand. To this day, I could still smell his cologne. It left me that day in the 70s, leaving the Coliseum, that, here's Stasiak. I smelled his cologne the rest of the night for an odd story, and it kind of hit home. But to see Bruno, and back then Putski and Billy Graham, my father at one time, who's still living, is going to be 84. He goes back and he used to tell me stories about, now this is when he watched it, because as the years went on, Dad said, son, get out of here, man. This is phony baloney. But he was a big Skull Murphy fan. Dr. Jerry Graham, the Graham brothers. My father was big into the heels of those guys during that day, and we used to talk stories about that when I was a little kid. So I'm starting to think that my first live event is early mid-70s in the New Haven Coliseum, before a few trips with Grandpa down to Madison Square Garden. In those days, in the early 70s, it was a different world, Joe. It was a different atmosphere. Everybody would dress up. My grandfather had a fedora. He had a shirt and tie and a jacket. And that's how you went to the wrestling matches. And I could remember being at the Coliseum and everybody's cheering for the babyface, which back in my day, kayfabe was still alive as a fan. No one was saying babyface and heel, but I always, when everybody was going crazy, and they would always get good crowds in those days, and here in WF territory, that whenever the heels would come back, whether it be Cicluna, Torquemada, again with the exception of Bruno, Stasiak, I would get out of my seat and start cheering, and I was looking around. I wasn't even a teenager, Joe, and I was the only guy, or the only boy, the only kid in the arena that was cheering on the bad guys.
Right.
So I remember those days, going with my aunt and uncle and saying, "Listen, I'm tired of staying up till midnight with this kid. I want to go to bed. He's 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. It was the horse trotters first, and then it went into pro wrestling, from the garden or wherever it was." And my father said to my uncle, we gotta take him live. We gotta take this kid live. Once he sees it live, he's gonna realize that this isn't what he thinks it is, and he'll never go back, and we'll never have to stay up till midnight watching this again. And keep an eye on a young boy. Well, later on, they would learn what a mistake that was to take me to the live show.
Yeah. Yes.
I got booked twice as much.
Right. Now let's talk about the Hall of Fame. So the WWF Hall of Fame, World Wrestling Federation launched it in 1993 in honor of Andre the Giant. So in that class, it was just Andre the Giant that year. They continued the Hall of Fame 94, 95, and 96. So there'd be 3 more ceremonies before they took a big gap. They wouldn't return until 2004. So 94, 95, and 96, we saw some pretty sizable classes, and you'd see guys like Gorilla Monsoon, George the Animal Steel, Superfly Jimmy Snuka, Captain Lou Albano, Bobo Brazil, the Big Cat Ernie Ladd, Arnold Scalding. They really got in a whole bunch of guys into the Hall of Fame. Now, why is it, in your opinion, that somebody like an Ivan Koloff is former world champion, great heel, not in the Hall of Fame? Now, I've heard, there could be politics and stuff like that, but even politics set aside, Vince McMahon's no longer with WWE. Somebody like an Ivan Koloff, why is he not in the Hall of Fame, in your opinion?
Ivan Koloff is a great example, Joe, and I can come up with many others, whether it be King Kong Bundy, and people will talk about the heat that he had and so on and so forth. The Hall of Fame has, in my opinion, it's a great thing. It's great for the guys, the girls. It's great for the fans, although there's no physical, to say, building that you can go visit. It would have to be politics. It would have to be some sort of incident. Back in the 70s, back in that era, for as much as it was crazy, if you really had problems with someone in a business, another talent, they held on to grudges sometimes. Ivan Koloff, the first man to beat Bruno to win that title in how many years? He was an integral part in the WWF. I've tried to research this before. I've tried to come up with my own answers. It's definitely something that should be righted, especially now that Vince Sr. has passed away. Vince Jr. is no longer really running the business. I would think they would start getting, there's many guys that should be in the W. Koloff, to me, is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Just for not only his accomplishments in the NWA and around the globe and WCW, and, with teaming up with Nikita, and long before that, and the people that he were with, Koloff was, just for that moment alone of beating Bruno, to me, belongs in the Hall of Fame. So that's a good answer, Joe. Maybe you'd be able to answer that better than me. Politics, there's way too much of that in today's current industry as well. Yeah. But that's another show for another time.
Right. Yeah, it's just surprising to me because you've seen others come back, Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund, people that said that they would never go in the Hall of Fame, the Ultimate Warrior, and we've seen them all go in. Larry Zbyszko was very unexpected. So I think by this point, we should have seen the Russian Bear in the Hall of Fame, but we haven't yet. And like you mentioned, there are others that haven't gone in yet that maybe are certainly deserving. I think, in my opinion, Rick Martel I think that Axe and Smash, the Demolition, are overdue. Although I have heard that they are going in this year coming up, so we'll see.
I've heard the same thing, Joe.
Yeah. Obviously, Tony Gurria, I think, would be a good addition to the Hall of Fame. So there are some, and I guess that's the fun of Hall of Fames. You can kind of bounce around different ideas in your head, and obviously there's one person's opinion and there's another person's opinion. Some people don't respect the Hall of Fame. Some people don't like Hall of Fames.
They don't respect it, Joe, until they're called for the Hall, and then all of a sudden it's an honor. I find that with a lot of people, whether it be independent or the major leagues, people don't like the Hall, but until they get that call. I was watching a shoot interview, which is now what they called it, which I think ruined the business, with Honky Tonk Man, who said, I don't care about the WWF, the Hall of Fame, this, that. But when you get the call, yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice. And the biggest injustice to me, along with Ivan Koloff, is King Kong Bundy.
Yeah.
Look what he meant to the business. Look how he shaped with Hogan and many other big men. He's been around for a long time, and someone will tell me, and the researchers and historians out there would tell you, well, Bundy had heat. He told this one to do this. He told this one to... Should that really matter when it comes to the Hall? We're going by your credibility, your longevity, how long you've been around. It's not necessarily how great you got along with the boys or the promoter. So that's another one that kind of gets me as a fan and someone who was an insider. Koloff and Bundy are the two biggest injustices currently in 2025.
Yeah, King Kong Bundy was a larger-than-life superstar, a household name. He was doing television, he was in some films, so people knew all about King Kong Bundy. He had a great career, came back a few times, reinvented himself. He was main event at WrestleMania 2, and would come back to wrestle Undertaker at WrestleMania 11 years later. So he was still doing it, and hopefully we'll start to see some of these guys. And obviously, Hall of Fames, even like the New England Hall of Fame, there's I don't know how to put, there's a way of doing it. I have my own way of doing it, and there's kind of like I like having a mix of different eras in one class. So
I like that as well.
And you put somebody in from a certain era, and then another person, wait a minute, how come this person's not in there from that same time period? It's like, I like to mix it up. So you're going to have more of a modern person who maybe has recently retired that had a great career, mixed in with somebody from the 70s or 80s that just hasn't been recognized yet, and I like mixing it up like that. And so that's the mayhem, the magic behind the scenes for me. That's how I do it, is I like having...
Well, Joe, and not to cut you off, because that's what I do. You have a difficult job with that New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, is because, let's face it, since the 70s and before, if you do your research and you know your history, New England could be one of the hottest areas, if not the most legendary area, for big-time pro wrestlers and independent wrestlers to come out of one area of the country. You want to break it down to the Midwest, the West Coast, the Pacific Northwest, the Mid-Atlantic, Texas, Florida. You want to look at all the different workers that have come out of those territories. New England's right there on the top with talent that it's produced in the history of New England, which I think a lot of people have forgotten about. And the New England independent scene, in the 90s, it was wonky, but for the last 10, 15 years, and especially now, it's like a territorial system of its own. There are so many groups running in this Northeast area that it is like a territorial system. You can find an independent pro wrestling show on any weekend throughout New England in multiple different towns and states. There's no better time to be an independent wrestler than right now in New England. But I want to give you a funny King Kong Bundy story, because we were just talking about it. I want to embarrass myself a little bit, so I apologize. I worked with Bundy several times here in Connecticut. and all the way out in Las Vegas for NWA, AWA Superstars. He was their champion, Dale Gagne and the likes. World Wrestling Zone in Chicago. So we were working an NWA show, and I was on the card. I don't know if I was with Tony DeVito and John Diamond for my matchup, which I think I was. And here comes Bundy, comes walking by the stands where the boys are. Now, I had no right to say this, but I said it. I thought I was being a joker and a huckster, and this is one of the few times where you learn respect in the business and how big it is, and I'll get to another infamous story from earlier in the 80s. But anyway, so Bundy comes walking by. There's a bunch of guys, a couple people sitting in the stands. I have no idea who's there, just a couple of boys next to me. Bundy says, hey, Big Daddy. I said, hey, lard ass. Totally out of character, thought I was being funny, and I wasn't. He no-sold it. We laughed, Get back into the dressing room. Bundy pulls me aside and said, hey, now you never know how it's going to go when people do this to you. Big Daddy, can I talk to you for a minute over here, away from everybody else? So I was like, oh, fuck. Oh, damn. So what did I do? I said, think, Big Daddy. So we get over there. He said, Big Daddy, he goes, I like you. You seem to be a nice guy. You're a big guy. He said, but do me a favor. Don't ever say that to me ever again. Unless it's here. Don't break my balls or do the boys thing unless it's here in the locker room. I said, I apologize, Bundy. I said, I really didn't mean it. No, I took it serious then once he got serious.
Yeah.
He said, because when you called me a lard ass, sitting 2 rows up behind you was my wife. And she said, who was that guy later on? And I said, I apologize, Bundy. I said, I'm way out of line. You're right. I wasn't thinking. I was trying to be a little bit of a wise ass and a ball breaker and a huckster and a joker. And he said, now. He said, you do it in the locker room, on the road. And I said, I sincerely apologized to him. He said, I won't forget it. And we let it go at that.
Wow.
So went on to shows, careers. Bundy's a world traveler, superstar. Years later, I run into Bundy at the AWA Superstars of Wrestling. We were in Laughlin, Nevada. We were in Bullhead City, Arizona, Las Vegas. And he was supposed to face the illustrious Johnny Stewart for the heavyweight title out there. Dale Gagne again, outdoor venue, 30,000 people. A big biker rally as well. We're doing an autograph session together, and Bundy's teasing me because, I like your buttons and your pins and your photos. He said, I'm going to have to start doing that as well. And he even signed a picture with some subliminal meaning to the girl I was with. I was like, I wonder what that's all about. So we're with him. I'm with DOA, Disciples of Apocalypse Crunch. Big dude, big guy. And we're going against Bundy. So here comes Bundy to the ring. We go out first. And seeing the Colorado mountains out in the back again, I'm forever grateful to be able to break out of the New England area. We get out, and here comes Bundy. Now I'm not thinking nothing of it. I had seen him the night before. We did some press stuff. We did some autograph signings. We get into the ring. He destroys my guy. Into the corner, the avalanche, down, this, that, the whole 9 yards. I go as my Captain Lou type character as a manager who took bumps. I slide into the ring after he avalanches my guy and gets the pin. I come up behind, a couple of forearms to the back of Bundy. Bundy turns around, grabs me by the scruff, jacks me back into the corner, lays back, Joe, big, right between the eyes. There goes the glasses. I was like, oh, damn. There goes the glasses. I slump onto the ropes. He pushes me down and then proceeds to get on me and step on me and hold the ropes a la Ultimate Warrior. And his full weight on my abdomen and chest. And I can't breathe. And it seems like forever. He finally gets off me. I roll out of the ring. Barely make it back to the dressing room. Bundy comes back to the dressing room and he's smiling. And he said, you remember when you called me a lard ass in front of my wife? He said, now we're even. That's the receipt.
Wow.
So he stiffed me. He potatoed me. Stepped on me. All with intent. was nice enough, a true professional, to come back and see how I was. You know, I had issues for like 2 or 3 days while we were out in Vegas, and he said, "I told you I'd get you." And it wasn't a year later, but it was like 6 months later, 8 months later, at another venue in another state, and that's how the business worked. I learned a lot from Bundy.
He said he wouldn't forget.
He said he wouldn't forget, and he didn't, and I have it on video. So it's those memories, and let's face it, Joe, you know a lot about the business. You've been around a long time, man. I deserved it. I was out of line.
Yeah.
I was out of line, and professionals, old school, they don't forget. And people talk about in these last decade and even going into 2026, oh, a receipt, a potato. That, no offense to anyone, but you really don't have any idea. So I can't get over that story, because now that he's passed, and then I ended up working with him again after that. Yeah, I'll never forget that story. It sticks with me forever because it was real.
Right. And you talk about the New Haven Coliseum, you know, venues in Connecticut. What are some of the other venues that you would attend as a child, you know, for WWF or WWF?
New Haven obviously was the staple, because we were only 20, I grew up in the Valley. We were only 20, 25 minutes away from New Haven. But as a kid, basically with my grandfather, especially whether it be going to Shea Stadium or the Garden, we were going to Madison Square Garden as a fan, as a young boy. Hartford Civic Center a little bit later, Springfield Civic Center, Providence, Boston. I'm trying to think, did we ever, when we went up to Toronto, my grandparents took me to Toronto, Ontario. My memory sometimes, it's like a lazy Susan, Joe. It'll come back around. I want to say the Toronto Maple Leaf Gardens, but I can't be 100% sure.
Yeah.
So those are the arenas. And again, New Haven Coliseum, as a kid, to me, might have been Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, that was your...
Because that was the WWF's home.
Right.
That was their home, man. I grew up in that Coliseum, whether it was the Harlem Globetrotters, the New Haven Nighthawks, or, you know, the New Haven Blades, different concerts. I saw my first concerts there as a young boy. So New Haven, that really was a legendary, iconic site. So as far as big arenas, you know, the ones you would associate with this area, Northeast was pretty damn good in the 70s and 80s, Joe.
Yeah.
It was a good place to be. Now, it's another story for another show.
Right. Now, of course, you said you started as a fan in the 70s. 1985 comes around. WrestleMania 1 is announced. What is your initial feedback? What do you call it? Your initial reaction, you know, when you hear WrestleMania 1, Madison Square Garden, as a fan, you know, what are you thinking?
Glued to the TV, glued to the MTV Brawl for All, and war to settle a score. Just to go back a little bit, 1983, when I was 20 years old and going to college, I met up with the Tonga Kid and Little Sam and Big Sam. They were living in Hamden. I was bouncing at Daniel's Discotheque while at college. I was in good shape, 190 pounds, not the 330 that I ended up being. They came into the club. I let them in. I recognized them from TV. Little Sam, I don't know, was he 17 or something? This was before he took over for Jimmy and went on to be Tonga, Madison Square Garden, the whole 9 yards. They came in. I knew who they were, because at the same time I was going to the world-famous World Gym in Hamden that was owned by Mike Katz, former Mr. USA. Everybody and their sister and their brother and their uncle from the WWF went to that gym. Don Morocco, Jesse Ventura, the Samoans, Ivan Putski, any star that came to New Haven went to that gym to work out. All us guys from Southern, bodybuilders, wrestlers, football players, we all went to World Gym to work out. So you had a big mingling on many occasions of WWF stars and legends at that time in the early 80s. Me working in the club right down the street, so it was all connected. So they came in. I'll never forget little Sam could pop and dance like you couldn't believe. He was out there dancing by himself. Now, this is Connecticut Studio 54, basically, at the time. So we ended up connecting because of the business and talking, and I became very good friends with little Sam. Went over to his house to have something to eat, and I'll never forget this. Had him and Big Sam up to my parents' house in the valley. My father, who kind of looks a little bit like Captain Lou, a 300-pound guy, big guy, and my mother, they said to themselves, who are these guys walking into the valley, into our house? And it was the Samoans, not Afonseca, but the kids. So they came over for dinner. I went over to their house. And what we had for lunch at that day was spaghetti with sauce on white bread with mayonnaise sandwiches.
Really?
That's what we were eating. And in their house, they had several snakes just slithering around the house in Hamden. I'm sitting at the table with little Sam. We'll call him Tonga. I don't know if he wants anyone to call him little Sam anymore. And I'm looking. And there goes a snake from the kitchen into the living room on the floor. He said, yeah, don't worry about it. They're all over the house. A ring in the backyard. So then it came to the point where little Sam needed rides to Madison Square Garden. And everybody's looking for a ride. So, so I would give him rides to certain venues. And then after a while, because you're talking 85 in the first WrestleMania. I will get back to that. I apologize. In 84, after 83, that's when I decided I wanted to get into the business. I never thought about it, never dreamt about it, never wanted to be a pro wrestler when I was a little boy into my teenage years. When I was in college, met up with Tonga, Big Sam, the World Gym atmosphere, the clubs. That's when I said, man, I want to try what these guys do. I wasn't an overly big guy, 6 feet, 190, but I was jacked, recovering from injuries. You found that out at the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame when I was inducted into your company. I never really told anybody that story. So in 84, there was no training schools. There was no facilities. You had maybe Gleason's. You had Larry Sharp. I don't even know if Kowalski had his school by then. He might have. And then you had Quest. Kenny Passarillo's Quest facility, which was the closest. So I went down to the Quest, and ran into Tony Altamori, his nephew Robbie Altamori, who's there. My longtime friend Mario Mancini is there. Now, of course, through the little time that I spent there, I think I saw Gurria, I think I saw Atlas, I think I saw Schultz. I don't even know if I had seen Roma at that point. I went down there with Marty Barbosa, who was jacked. Now, at this time, Joe, I'm in good shape. 4 years previously, I broke my back. I broke both my feet in an accident. Couldn't walk for a year and a half. Was in a back brace, double cast. I still have the Polaroid photos. Anything that I say is all on video, photo, or Polaroids. Like certain people who keep like my calendars, I kept most everything that I went through for whatever odd reason. I was an odd guy. And so I thought I was in good enough shape recovering from that accident at 16. I was 16 years old in that horrific accident. I thought I recovered great because I was doing good in the gym. I looked good. I was bouncing. I went to a couple of classes with Altamori School, and just Mario, who I assume had just gotten there at that point. I didn't know him from a hole in the wall. I didn't even know where he was from. A couple of days of the Beals, the hip tosses, running the ropes, taking the flat back bumps. I walked out of there, Joe, with my tail between my legs. I kept landing the wrong way. I kept hitting my feet, which you know what it did to my ankles that I had already broken. 6 bones in both feet and on both sides. I was like, man, this kind of got humbled, embarrassed. I said, this isn't for me. I ended up owing them the money, Kenny Passarillo. Owing them the money. So they allowed me to come hang there for a couple of weeks. So I kept going back to the school, but they wouldn't let me get in the ring until I paid the balance, which makes sense. And me, I didn't have the money. I was working 2 and 3 jobs in college. My parents were broke. I had no way to get the money to be able to go. And then I was realistic and said, hey, dude, bro, wake up. Can you even do this? So I walked away. And still, I walked away, didn't It didn't work out. I could be honest enough to say I couldn't hack it. And the schools were different and tougher back then. Mario doesn't remember. He barely remembers what he had for breakfast yesterday. When I bring up these stories, until I send him photos from that era, because I look totally different. I look like a pretty boy. He goes, oh, now I remember. I look like a different guy. So I walked away, stayed a fan, and then I apologize. Your original question of 1985, I was still a student in college. I remember going to one of the buildings on the college campus, and they had it on pay-per-view. And leading into that first WrestleMania, all the stuff on MTV, in college co-ed dorms, we would get together till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, whenever you got back from the bars, the parties on campus, and we would watch MTV, and that's when it became even bigger, because I was already a fan of the NWA, World Class, Georgia, Mid-Atlantic, Polynesian Pacific Wrestling, all of that. I was a huge fan of all wrestling at that point. But that's how we did it, from MTV, and then sitting down in that building, and I was hook, line, and sinker. Had been married at that point, 1985, just getting ready to get married, just starting my 25-year service for this country behind the walls as a corrections officer, and a huge wrestling fan, and in the back of my head thinking, is there still a chance for you to maybe try to find your way in to do this? Because let's be honest, physically I couldn't cut the mustard full time. I just couldn't do it. But that was, and at the same time in 85 of WrestleMania, the NWA was doing their Starrcade stuff.
Right.
So I was torn between the two because they were just such different styles of wrestling.
Yeah.
So that's where I was. I hope I answered the question. I know I went roundabout because I wanted to start off of where I actually started. And you probably were going to get to that question anyway. When did you start? Where did you go? So I kind of read your mind.
Yeah.
So.
When it came to NWA, did you also watch NWA, or were you solely a WWF fan?
Well, solely a WWF fan in the 70s. When we got to the late 70s into the early 80s is when I really branched out into the territorial wrestling. Loved the NWA, loved World Class Championship Wrestling, and again, Mid-Atlantic, Georgia. So they were just a different style of pro wrestling, but I, at that point, loved them all. NWA, yeah, that was a little more realistic than what was going on up here in the WWF, but that WWF to me was my home as a fan.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, always WWF. I knew of everything else from the magazine. I was a big magazine guy. So I had them all. I mean, I would collect almost every single magazine that would come out, every variety, and I would keep them in mint pristine condition. I was kind of obsessed with them, and they would be in drawers in my room. And, I'd look through them every once in a while, and if I saw a new issue, I had to get it. Inside Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, New Wave Wrestling. I mean, there were so many different ones, obviously, as we got a little later into the game, Wow Magazine with Bill Apter. But, yeah, it was always nice collecting the magazines. But I knew of them all, the territories, but I would just watch the WWF. That's really all I had access to,
Right.
as far as television and that sort of thing. But I rented 1986 Skywalkers, the Scaffold, match, Legion of Doom or Road Warriors. And that was my first experience in watching
Wow.
not anything other than WWF, but NWA specifically, or Crockett Promotions. And other than that, there were a few tapes that I would buy at little stores like Cost Plus or Stewart's, and they would always have these VHS tapes. I don't know if you remember. There was a series of them. One had Andre, one had Bundy, one had Macho Man. It was kind of almost like a caricature on the cover. And basically all of those were pretty much Memphis wrestling.
So great territory.
Yeah, you'd see, that was my first time seeing Memphis wrestling and even really knowing, that there was a Memphis wrestling. I just, I knew about the NWA, I knew about the AWA, but for whatever reason, I just didn't know about Memphis. And seeing the Rick Rudes in there and Coco Beware and Jim Neidhart and like all these guys and Jerry Lawler, obviously.
Nothing like Lawler and Dundee in that day.
Yes, yeah, and that was big. So, you know, it was a different time, obviously, but I'm happy to have grown up when I did because there were so many territories. You had that special feeling of being able to buy the magazines and seeing stuff.
That's why I want to jump in on you, Joe. The magazine era of the 70s was phenomenal. That's the way you found out about a lot of things back then, too. I would pester my father to once a week, on a weekend, a Saturday or Sunday, to bring me to a actual magazine store and stand where you walked in. This is the 70s. The guys aren't wearing fedoras. They're smoking the stogies. My father would drop me off on the corner, circle around. He said, give me whatever I needed. He said, don't pick out one, son. He goes, you can pick out 2 or 3. I would walk into the store from the outside where all the papers were, into the store, and there would be racks of magazines, of pro wrestling magazines. The imagery and the ability, you know, we know most of it was kayfabe, but what the old school magazine guys did for the 70s and into the 80s, if people didn't grow up in that era, because now they're big, people are collectibles, but to actually live it and see it and purchase it in real time, the magazine eras was fantastic. Really captured my imagination, and continue to want to somewhere, somehow, some way live what you saw as a kid. Magazines were great.
Yeah, it was unbelievable, and it's too bad that, you know, kids nowadays, they don't have that option, you know, because I would go to the supermarket shopping with my mom, and immediately that's the question I would ask her: can I go to the magazine aisle? Yeah, fine, go to the magazine aisle, just stay there. And that's exactly where I would stay, and I'd be reading all the magazines, and, you know, by the time she got over to me, I would be begging her to take them all home. And she was nice enough to buy them all for me, and I would always have, you know, like I said, so many different magazines, and just, I could never get enough, you know, just reading up on all the different territories. I would love the little sections in the back where they would have results from all the different shows, even local here in New England. You'd see all the different independent promotions, Tony Rumble, and, you know, and I'm seeing this, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. You're seeing show-to-show results, you know. So magazines were amazing, and they ended up coming out, I think the first issue was in 95. It was the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Almanac. And
Yes.
when the almanacs would started in 95 or 96, they come out once a year, and it was a nice little thick, you know, paperback book, and I had to get it every single year, and it always had the entire history of the different promotions, the different territories, all of the championships, you know. I mean, it was very intense, and I'll never forget those. Those were a great way to brush up on your history, you know, of pro wrestling.
And a good way to influence the fans and to keep it a little more mysterious. And I really miss the days of kayfabe, I have to be honest. Now we're going to go out there and we're going to perform this storyline and ring psychology and emotional investment and have you pay the money and come and see it and suspend your disbelief and make you think what we're doing is on the up and up. But then we're going to come back in the press conference or the media scrum that they call it nowadays, and then we're going to tell you exactly what we just tried to make you believe. That's like, and I heard somebody say this, I don't know where it is, who said it, but it's like a magician on stage showing you all the tricks, and then when you're done, he brings you backstage, and what you just watched and believed, he's showing you how he did it. And that has ruined the business, and that's just my own personal opinion.
Yeah. And so you walked away, it wasn't for you. When did you get back involved and decide to give it another shot, become a manager? When did that all happen?
Well, thanks, Joe. That's an excellent question. Sometimes it gets lost. So 85, we're talking WrestleMania and this and that. 86, I get married. I have 2 kids. I'm working in the prison system. 1988, 89 happens. A friend of mine who's very close, how this all comes around and how they've been involved in my life for so long, is good friends with the Samoans, who I haven't seen since 84, 85, 83 when I first met them. So now here we are years later. He said, hey, dude, I know you always liked wrestling, this and that. He knows I went to the school and flunked out, if you so to speak. He said, let's take a ride. I'm going to hook up with Big Sam and Little Sam down south. You want to continue to learn the business. You want to meet these guys. You want to see what it's really all about and maybe find something to go on. I said, I would love to. Again, I'm leaving the wife and kids back at home. I'm getting swaps at my job, or at least taking the time off. I don't know if swaps were invented yet. And this is 88, 89. We travel down to the Hampton Coliseum, Baltimore Arena, and I get a chance to hang out with Big Sam and Junior, or Rikishi and Samu, the Samoan SWAT team. So at that time, the Samoan SWAT team is in their monster feud with the Road Warriors. So just driving in the car, going to the hotels, going to the restaurants, from town to town, in the vehicle with the guys, Freebird Michael Hayes, Ron Simmons, Butch Reed, Sting, Luger, Jack Victory, the Samoan SWAT team. We're all in different hotels and stuff like that. I mainly drove with Big Sam and Junior, and that's a story I got to tell you too, because we've amended it again. It's about respect, and there's receipts. So I have to tell you that. Met the Steiners, especially Scotty, before he even really made his official debut. I bumped into this dude backstage. Good-looking kid in great shape, wearing a Michigan jacket, I believe. I didn't even know who he was. I had no idea who Steiner was. I was like, hey, how you doing? I was like, wow, this guy's in great shape. This, that. Ended up being, it was Scott Steiner. So we're sitting backstage, and I'm watching the Samoan SWAT team and the Road Warriors in that big feud, especially in the historic Baltimore Arena. And then you go home and you see it on TV. We're out the night before, and we're partying, Joe. Nothing like cocaine or anything like that, but you're smoking, maybe you're drinking, and driving down the road. Now I'm driving. Sitting behind me is Rikishi. I didn't know him as that then. Out of nowhere, and again, we're drinking, not making the best decisions in life. My buddy's here. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, as I'm driving down the highway, I don't know, I think we were in Virginia, I don't know. Whack. While I'm driving, I got cupped along the side of the ear by Junior. Out of nowhere. Stunned me, disoriented, the car almost swerved, almost went off the road, could have killed us all. I'm stunned. So one of my mistakes, what do, Joe? I turn around and I take a slap at Rikishi. Now remember, I'm a nobody. He's a part of the Samoan SWAT team at that time. World Tag Team Champions, whatever. Pull over the car. We pull over to the car. We get out, we go face to face. Now back then, I'm 6 feet, I'm 300 pounds. I certainly didn't take any guff from anybody, but I wasn't looking to get into a scrap with a 350-pound savage Samoan. I wasn't looking for that. And we were supposed to be friends because we were having a great time. This is where, when you mixed alcohol and stuff like that, things get lost in translation, and you should never do it. So I said, Junior, why did you slap me? I'm driving. He said, how dare you put your hands on me? How dare you touch me? How dare you slap me? You know who I am, this, that. I said, hey, listen, brother. Out of all respect, I said, I'm driving and you cuffed me out of nowhere. What did you think I was going to do? So he's advancing towards me now. And behind us is a big plate glass window to a car dealership. He said, you disrespected me and you'll never disrespect me. I looked at my buddy and I said, Junior, I would never disrespect you, disrespect your family or this business. And that's the God's honest truth to this day, Joe. I didn't disrespect him. This slap came out of nowhere. He said, I'm going to get you, and I'm going to throw you through that plate glass window. And he starts advancing on me. What are we going to do here, guys? Hello? Say. So I start backing up around the car. And he starts pursuing me and going faster. And I keep going around the car, and he's like, I'm going to get you. And the boys are just watching. Nobody's intervening. It's you. You got to get yourself out of it now. So it came to the point, I was like, I'm not going to, I can't keep circling around this car. So I stopped. And he came up to me face to face. I thought he was going to grab me and slam me through a plate glass window. And I said, I'm man enough to admit I had tears in my eyes. I said, Junior, I never once disrespected you. Give me the example. What did I say? What did I do? Make me understand why you want to try to throw me through this plate glass window. I said, we're just coming off a couple of days on the road. We had a great time. He hugs me and he laughs. And he said, I'm just kidding with you, bro.
Wow.
And him and the guys walk across the street to the diner. I'm standing there by the car. I had tears coming down my eyes. I was like, what just happened here? What happened? It was all a rib. It was all a work. I walk across the street, get into the diner. The boys are sitting down there eating. I sit right next to Rikishi, Junior. He turns and look at me. He said, dude, why you got tears in your eyes? I said, because number one, the biggest thing is you thought that I would actually disrespect you. Number two, you were getting ready to throw me through a plate glass window. And now it's a joke. The waitress heard everything. She goes, is everything okay over here? He pats me on the back. He said, yeah, everything's fine. Everything's great. He apologized. We forgot about it. We continued with the night. The next day, that's why it was Virginia, because I think we went from Virginia to Baltimore or Baltimore to Virginia. We show up at the arena. This is stuff you can't make up, Joe. We're sitting on the bleachers behind the curtains for a big show for, at the time, they were WCW, I think. Here comes the Animal and Hawk. Okay? They come walking in full regalia, and I'll never forget it. And I'm sitting there, humble. Here comes the Animal and Hawk approaching me and the Samoans with an SST, and out of nowhere, Hawk goes, now, how he would know this, your guess is as good as mine. He said, hey, Big Daddy. I got chills when he said that. He said, I heard you got into a little scrap last night. Just like that, in that Road Warrior Hawk voice. And I just turned and I looked at Junior. He turned and looked at me and he just smiled and went like this. Talk about a story. Talk about not knowing which way it was going to go. And then we went on and I watched them in the ring as they slammed each other, and we went out that night and, partied up, leaving the arena with Junior and Michael Hayes. There were about 30 or 40 fans waiting for us out there. They attacked the car, jumped on it, tried to break the windshields, smashing beer cans all over the place. And this is not one of my prouder moments, Joe. Flashback a little bit. Everybody's back there. They're taking a shower. I'm just hanging around. I'm a hang around, okay? I'm just hanging around. Lucky enough that they allowed me to. I had to go to the bathroom, stomach's a little fucked up, and this is a little, I apologize for the cussing, and a little more than people want to know, but this is the true real life things that happened. Michael Hayes comes walking out of the shower. For whatever reason, I always seem to catch a peek of everybody's winky. I mean, I'm no Seinfeld character, but he comes walking out. I had just gotten out of the bathroom, and he said, who the hell, and that I can't do Michael Hayes, who the hell went in there and blew that place up, or... It was me. I just taken a mess and had blown up the area a little bit, as we like to see. And Hayes came out and he was so offended. He said, was that you? I said, my stomach's a little fucked up, Mike. A little messed up, Mike. So those are little stories that I can't, 40 years later, I can't get out of my head that these are part of the memory. So that's why, maybe your audience likes this stuff, maybe it doesn't, but these are stories that have never been told, that have all been written down, and unless you were there in real time, I don't usually come out with these stories. You know what I mean? So, and then of course we went on, and I came back home to the Northeast. Boom, right back to corrections, family, so on and so forth. So, your original question was, Joe, how did I get started?
Yeah, getting back into it, and officially becoming a manager.
Officially. 1991, I made my debut. I had made local connections in the area. Hooked up with the Condor, a.k.a. Mark Thomas, Rick Fuller, Bobby Moran, Rocky Jones, even Mike Lawler. guys like that were sometimes dark matches and job guys in the WWF. I went, and because of the Road Warriors as well, I went to full face paint as a manager, wore a shirt and tie with a full face paint like the Road Warriors, and got a chance locally and said, hey, Big Daddy, and I said, you know what, I can't do the match full time, there's got to be a way. I said, you grew up on Albano, Blassie, The Wizard, Bobby Heenan as you got older. I said, you were always a talker, into personal communication skills. You want to be a character. You're not going to get over or get your guys over by being a wrestler, because I couldn't do it. I said, if you could just learn to take 2 or 3 big bumps at the right time to help put the match and the guys over and garner enough heat, maybe you'll find a place in this business. And that's what I did. 1991, 92, 93, ended up going to ECPW, Gino Caruso, Rocky Jones with Iron Mike Sharp down at his place. There really was no place to go train. I wasn't going into Gleason's. That would be later on with John Diamond and Tony DeVito. That would be in the late 90s. But so I learned basically on the job training. Guys allowed me, because they thought I was a character. I always helped out setting up the ring, breaking it down, hanging up flyers back in the day, promoting the show. I did that back in the early 90s. So people thought, this guy would be a good asset. And there certainly wasn't any independent managers in the late 80s, or we'll say technically early 90s in the independent scene. Later on, you would have your Paul Adams and your Kenny Casanovas and Pat the Brat Pipers and guys like that. But there was no managers, and then so that's where the official start was. 1991 was the debut. Few and far between bookings, some up here in New England. Actually worked with Bull Montana when he was still active as a referee.
Wow.
I got the videotape, Joe. I got the videotape. And to another funny story with Bull Montana. We're in Boston Garden, right? Bull been around a long time. I'm thinking this was the middle 90s, Joe. Sometimes I get my time frames a year or two off. So Bull Bull knows everybody. He's a local celebrity, from Tony Rumble and NWA New England, and just himself. Bull is a unique individual, a great guy who everybody loves. So I would travel around with him. I said, I'll give you a ride, Bull. Come on, come with me. So we get into the Boston Garden, and we go backstage, and who's the first person we run into when I see the helicopter?
Who?
The helicopter.
The helicopter.
The helicopter.
Okay.
Ric Flair!
Well, yeah, obviously, right.
I told you, Joe, I have this knack, whether it's Jerry Lawler, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Michael Hayes, Ric Flair, somehow somebody always flashes the winky. It seems to happen over and over in my career. That's another story. So he introduces me to Ric Flair. Hi, how you doing? Hey, Rick, I want you to meet my buddy Big Daddy. He introduces me as a tag team partner to Kevin Sullivan. Now, I don't know if Bull was a little umbriag at that day or an age. I never tag teamed with Kevin Sullivan. Now, don't get me wrong. We worked on the same events. We go back to CWA, Central Wrestling Alliance, when they were running even down at the Wallingford, out in the parking lot. So I had my connection and did a short run with CWA, with Steve Zion, the Z-Man, and all those guys. And they used CWA with Tony Rumble, used everybody from Atlas to Bill DeMott to, Vic Steamboat, to everybody, as you well know your history.
That's when
So
Bill
again,
Crash the Terminator, right?
Crash the Terminator rings a bell. Rings a bell.
That was Bill DeMott.
Right, Bill. Right. I have some of the videos downstairs. It's crazy, the VHS stuff that I've never converted over. Early 90s cable access shows. And here in this area, there were about 8 or 9 cable access shows in the 90s devoted to independent pro wrestling. To where a lot of the big stars would because so you would get your grade by doing that too. That's how I knew I could become a manager. Yeah. I was big enough and got myself in decent enough shape with the injuries that I could take those bumps. I've taken some legendary bumps over the day, Joe, to put over the match. And I've been so humbled and blessed and fortunate to have so many people to allow me to work with them, because if it wasn't for them, there would be no Guardian of Chaos.
Yeah.
Not only does the promoter got to bring you in, you got to find the talent to allow you to work with them and trust that you're not going to screw up the match. Because I always had 3, 4, 5, 6 spots throughout the matches throughout my career, and would always come out 2, 3, 4 times a night on certain events. You were there for some of them. Again, you were talking about interviews, one of your first interviews on your podcast and what you did in your career. One of the earliest interviews I can remember with you was probably maybe 1999, 2000. You were backstage as a good-looking, buff, young Joe Bruin, doing a lot of different interviews. I mean, you've been around, people don't realize you've been around a long time in multi-facets, applying your trade to where you are now, but that's another story. So I know I'm rambling here. I feel like the Allman Brothers.
That was in Connecticut. That was that was 2000, and that would have been Northeast Wrestling.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, and I remember that night.
That's a long time ago.
It is, yeah. I mean, it was probably early to mid 2000, but I remember that night perfectly. And it was, it was you, it was Kenny Casanova, it was John Diamond, Just Incredible, Jason Knight, May and Moolah.
Yes, we went out to dinner that night.
Yeah. Just Incredible, Jim Duggan, and Tony DeVito. Low Key and Xavier.
Maybe even the Giant Primo. I think Primo was there as well.
Primo was there. Yep, I didn't get a chance to interview him, but he was there. Low Key and Xavier were there. There were 2 no-shows, which was Tammy Sitch, Sonny, and Psycho Sid. I do remember that.
Good memory, Joe. Good memory.
Yeah, it was a great experience. It was my first time at Northeast Wrestling. And
how old were you there, Joe? Were you like 19?
So 2000, 18.
Wow.
I was 18.
Wow.
Yeah, because I started when I was 16. So yeah, I was 2 years in at that point.
Wow. I give guys like you, and again, I know we're going off here. It's natural, it's organic, it's ad lib. Guys like yourself, guys like Tommy Fierro, other guys that I could think of that I met, even guys like my good friend Kurt Adonis. I met all you guys at 18, 19, 20 years old, and to see what you've accomplished on not only the promotion side, in some cases the in-ring side, but just what you do here now, over 25 years later, you guys have made more of an impact doing what you do than a lot of workers who try to maintain and make this as a living. There's a lot to be said for guys like you, Tommy Fierro, and there's others, and what Kurt's doing now. I mean, I just find it to be incredible what you guys continue to do.
Well, I appreciate that. And, it's obviously it's always been a passion for me, especially the interviewing side of it. I've always loved the interviewing. So whether it be backstage interviews or having my own talk show with Cox Cable and having some of the local talents in the studio, the different aspects of interviewing. But this is the first time now with this podcast that I've had the opportunity to really get those in-depth interviews. And that is my true passion. I feel like this is where I should be. It's something that I've always done, like I said, on different levels. And this is my comfort zone. So happy to be doing it.
You fit it very well. I don't know if you're getting regular feedback, and I've been watching the majority of your shows. Your demeanor, your approach, your professionalism, it comes across. It's definitely unique. You're not clickbait. You're not looking here to do shoot interviews. It's not chicanery. It's presented in the most professional capacity, and you have the voice for it and the approach for it. And what I've noticed, and it's not going to happen to me, Joe. It doesn't happen to me. You catch a lot of people off guard. You catch a lot of the stars and people off guard with what you ask them, and their genuine reaction is like, wow. So I like that about what you're doing here on AllAxxess. You catch them off guard.
Appreciate that. Appreciate the support. And, it's one of those things that I'm not a gossip guy, so I never have been. I'm not here to promote anything negative, none of the negative side of pro wrestling, because enough people do that. And I've always been a positive person in general. So that's not me anyway. But we already have enough people with all the clickbait and all the the gossip, and I hate seeing it myself in my feed, and it's certainly not something that I'm going to participate in. So even telling, being here to tell your story and everybody else's story that I interview here, I'm here to tell the story itself, not to try to dig out those little bits of drama so I can make it a big deal. It's just not something that I'm interested in doing, and I think that sets me apart because I watch a ton of podcasts, I watch a ton of interviews. It's funny, all the time that I put into my own podcast, the rest of my time when I'm not with the family is using up that time to watch other people's interviews, and that's all that I'm doing. I'm constantly watching every single. Chris Van Vliet, I haven't missed one episode since he started.
He's excellent. Van Vliet is excellent.
Yeah, and I saw when he started just like I did, backstage, doing some backstage interviews or interviewing Chris Jericho in a limo, and I was there watching it all as it happened, and it's great to see, where he's gone. And he's another one that's usually not really digging for, the dirt. Every once in a while he'll sprinkle in something, but he's one that is just kind of there to tell the story, and I do appreciate that. I've always been a fan of Sam Roberts. Sam Roberts is another one.
Sam Roberts is pretty level-headed.
Yeah.
I'll say that for him. And again, it shows in your product you have found your niche. And the one thing that you could truly say about yourself is you're not doing this for money. And that's a big thing, Joe. You're doing it out of love and motivation and passion for something that you've enjoyed your whole life. It comes across in the product, and a lot of people can't say that because everybody is about the money.
Right.
It's that simple.
Yeah, I'm not making
for the most part.
This. Yeah, this is a passion project, and I started in October. I think it was October. Started filming, and come spring, I'll already be at 100 episodes. So
yeah, you're banging them up.
Yeah, we're trying to get as much in as possible, and the important thing that I feel the most important is it kills me to see a missed opportunity. Somebody say, I'm all right, I'm going to interview this guy. All of a sudden he passes away. God forbid. That will just bother me because to me, it's a story untold. You know what I mean? And like I said, a lot of the guests that I get are people who maybe they don't know the fans don't know the story because they haven't done many interviews or they haven't done in-depth interviews. And I don't want any lost opportunity. So I would rather bang out, hundreds of interviews right off the bat and just get them in the can. So those are not lost.
Smart.
And those stories are there to be told, maybe not right away, but we've got them.
Just two examples of that. When I was fortunate enough that you selected me to go in 2019 to the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, again, perhaps the biggest honor in my journey in pro wrestling. I would say the biggest honor besides working with what talent. And, Gene Okerlund was supposed to be there. I had never met Gene Okerlund. He was supposed to be at the Hall of Fame at FanFest 7, and he passed away right before that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And Gene wasn't able to make it, so you talk about missed opportunities, even though you've talked to him before. And then on a personal note, a good friend of ours, I just found out within the last 24 or 48 hours, legendary referee from this great area of the Northeast, Dave Dwinell, is very sick. And I know that he's been diagnosed with some pretty bad stuff and is being moved into hospice. And, my prayers and thoughts go out to Dave Dwinell, who I worked with hundreds of times and met him at one of your last Hall of Fame. Re-met him after not seeing him for years in the ring. And I was fortunate enough to buy his book. And now you see what's happening to our old-time friend. And I wish him nothing but well and positivity. It's to your point of what you're saying of getting it when the time is there, the people are here to appreciate them while you still have the opportunity. So my condolences or strength, throwing out my strength and prayers to Dave and his wife.
Dave and Val have always been awesome. Dave's such a good guy. He was inducted into the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2011.
11, okay.
Yep, and he was there, same class as Chief J and Rick Martel, Tito Santana, Samu, and yeah, it was just a great class. But Dave Dwinell has always been first class. He's been a true pro, just the nicest, most genuine guy, and to see him having to go through this and his family having to go through this, I received a call from his wife about 2 weeks ago, and she gave me the news. She said Dave wanted her to call me, and it was a tough conversation. It was a tough phone call.
Yes.
And Dave is, think about all the time that Dave's put into the wrestling business. You know what I mean? And he would be the referee that not only the independents but WWF would use him regularly. For Madison Square Garden and a lot of the New England shows. Dave would be right there with all the biggest names, and but just always a humble guy, very caring, very giving. So Dave Dwinell, one of the greats of New England, and I'm glad that we were able to get him in the New England Hall of Fame for sure.
Yeah, it was great reconnecting him. And when I think of guys like Dave Dwinell and old school and his stories and being able to pick his brain and just be around him, I'll be forever fortunate and blessed. And it's just, I can name many other guys too, and thankfully he's still with us, but guys like Frank Krasnowski and local legends around here that have been into broadcasting and worked for the WWE in no matter what capacity, whether it be as a ref, a ring announcer, or a wrestler. And it's guys like that I've also was able to learn from, and just to be able to work with them was such an honor. I can't get enough. Frank Krasnowski, another great guy.
Yeah. What are your memories of Ron Zombie?
I love Ronnie, number one. I consider him a dear friend. He's the type of guy that I could not see for 2 or 3 years, and it's like we've been together, staying in touch forever. I met Ron. A lot of times I would see Ron at local events before he was a wrestler. Before he ever stepped in the ring, I would see him at parking lot shows and arena shows. And then I ran into Ron, NWA New England. I found out he had gotten into the business. I've seen him perform many times, whether he was being managed by Jim Cornette, he was with the New York Posse. He did a lot of stuff for Rumble. I know he trained with Kowalski. Then I saw him as one of the co-trainers assistants at House of Pain Pro Wrestling Dojo with Jason Knight in Connecticut. Ron and I have been in the ring together and across the ring from each other with my stable of guys. He has busted me bloodied and beaten. He's potatoed me. I'm impressed with Ron. We had this conversation years ago. This guy could work forever, even though he's older than a lot of the workers. He has longevity. He knows how to work, whether it be tag team, 6-man tag. Ron's information about this business, with being with all the legends, how much this kid learned in NWA New England, in this Northeast area, and with Kowalski and with Tony Rumble, and then going on to work for Northeast. Ronnie never really branched out, I don't think, into a lot of different promotions. I think he stayed with his core promotions. But the guys, not only does he have the look, not only is he one tough sumbitch, I mean, he's definitely a New England legend, a good friend, and a guy who I've taken my lumps with before, and I consider him, everybody throws this term around a lot, brother. I consider Ron Zombie a brother, and he's one heck of a guitar player as well.
Yes.
Zombie made his impact, and he's had his touch with greatness. Yeah. He really has. I could say that about Ronnie. Yeah. I love him.
He went in the class of 2014 for the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. And, with Ron, I found through his interview and his episode that, it was great to hear that he was such a fan of ECW as a fan. And then fast forward to when he entered the business, he got to work with pretty much all of the ECW talent.
Yeah.
Whether he was teaming with them or facing them or riding on the roads with them. So, great story for Rob Zombie to basically, live his dream. And
Ronnie should be writing a book because he has an interesting life.
Yeah. Yeah, Ron's a good man. Yeah, it'd be a great book, absolutely. How about Johnny Heartbreaker? We know of his Johnny Heartbreaker early on, of course, Romeo
Johnny
Roselli.
Heartbreaker. First off, a tremendous guy. as a person, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He was inducted along with myself and Antonio Thomas, the Heartthrobs, into the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in the class of 2019, and to have Bill Apter there and Gary Michael Capetta and J.J. Dillon, present, Trey, Widow, Mistress Belmont. There were so many. Gorman was there. It was really a great night, that 2019 Hall of Fame. I met John, again, when he was a teenager, and he was a photographer. John was originally a ringside photographer. I think he had something to do with tapes as well. And from meeting him as a young kid, good-looking kid, in good shape, wasn't a real big kid, but just one of the genuine people in the business, he went on to and put the work into it physically to build himself up, make the connections, decided he wanted to be a pro wrestler. And this guy went on to do a lot, whether it be over in Italy, I believe was the Italian heavyweight champion, being in multiple commercials, being on TV for reality shows, being in with Mickey Rourke in the movie The Wrestler, making it to the WWE with Antonio Thomas, to have their run as the Heartthrobs, and to seeing him from a photographer and him and Antonio, who was a preliminary guy in the independents, and working with them, to see them both together as good friends on national TV, it's like one of your kids making it. And Romeo worked with the best in the independents. He was working with guys like AJ Styles, Low Key, Xavier, everyone that you could think of, doing intergender matches with the likes of, Velvet Sky, who went on to do really big things. And Johnny worked with, Miss Cara, just, Mickey James. Johnny Heartbreaker, a.k.a. Romeo Rosselli, is a dream come true. There's a kid who made his dream come true. Personal trainer, connections to the New York Mets, goes around and trains physically corporate companies, a family man. I mean, how much more can I put over Romeo Rosselli and it be genuine? And John was always good to me, and just a good guy. And boy, oh boy, everyone talks about, the Rock and Roll Express and, Janetti and Michaels and the girls that used to chase them, because Romeo was no runaround. But boy, did the women go crazy for Johnny Rosselli. Wherever we went, the women went nuts for Romeo. They really did.
Yeah. First time meeting John was, I ran my very first wrestling show. It was the Hardcore Wrestling Federation, September of 1999. Bert Centeno was supposed to be on the show, couldn't make it. So he was helping train Johnny at the time. So he sent John down as a student. This was probably his first or second match. And it was a tag team match, and he wrestled as Johnny Heartbreaker on my show. Teamed up with the Widowmaker, I believe, Eric Storm.
I remember the Widowmaker.
Yeah, and they teamed up that night, and it was, like I said, his first or second match. And then to see, how far he went after that was fantastic. But definitely a good guy. Let's talk about Mount Rushmore. When it comes to Mount Rushmore, there are different ways to look at it. Like I've mentioned before, could be a personal choice, personal preference. Could be, the biggest stars in the game, who made the most money. Really, it comes down to how you want to look at it. What is your personal Mount Rushmore for pro wrestling on a TV side of things? WWF, WCW, NWA territory.
I like the way you approach the question, Joe, because you could certainly come up with a Mount Rushmore for several different eras. And that's probably the appropriate way to do it. So I like that approach. But for me personally, it's Bruno Sammartino, it's Ric Flair, it's Harley Race, it's Dusty Rhodes. That's my Mount Rushmore. And if I had to have an alternative, because I'm allowed one, I think. If not, I'm going to give myself one. It would be Hulk Hogan, without question.
Yeah.
I mean, how could you keep guys off the Mount Rushmore, guys like a Terry Funk, or a Stone Cold, or a Bret Hart? There's many others, but to me, there will never be anyone like Bruno Sammartino. There will never be another person the way they worked and the way they presented themselves in Ric Flair. Harley Race, old school wrestler, one of the toughest SOBs around. The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, the common man and his impact for blue collar common America. And then Hogan, just for what he did, put aside what people think he did in the ring. I mean, there's other people, like I said, that would love to have on that list. A Terry Funk, a Bruiser Brody, a Stan Hansen. When I look at today's stars, who am I at 60 plus years old to say someone, the new day modern Mount Rushmore's John Cena, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and maybe The Undertaker. That's what a lot of people would say. And they're not wrong for this era. But when that era was created and coming about, a lot of the guys who say that were in their teen years or younger. I was already in my middle 30s when the Attitude Era, into my late 30s, when the Monday Night Wars Attitude Era, whatever those different generations came along. I was already in my 30s, mid-30s, in the business, so I kind of look at it a little bit different.
Yeah. And then Mount Rushmore for the New England side of things. Male superstars from New England specifically, what would your Mount Rushmore be?
Joe, an impossible question. An impossible question to ask, an impossible question to answer. There is so many guys over the years that have impressed me. I mean, you know, where they went, you know, if you're talking strictly New England, you could look at guys like, on different levels, a Slick Wagner Brown, a Knuckles Nelson, and Eric Sprasia. You know, you could look at guys like, you know, Luis Ortiz. You could look at so many other guys who were just on the cusp of this New England area, whether it be Xavier or Low Key. Different guys that have been, I'm missing a lot here. You want to go by degrees of success, whether they were just great on the indies or they made it to the major leagues. What makes the Mount Rushmore of indies? It's different than the Mount Rushmore of the major leagues. I could, if I had to think about it, my memory's not always the best, I could sit here and probably come up with 20 names. There's so much great talent that I was lucky enough to see and to be on events with. I mean, it's a really, I mean, you look at guys like Nick Barbary, who also had a run. He's from Connecticut and did well with as a worker in the WWE. I mean, I could think of that's one where I said, you're not going to do it to me, Joe Bruin. You're not going to catch me off guard. You're not going to have me rumble, stumble, bumble. This is the one that you may have me on as far as a Mount Rushmore of guys that came out of New England. I mean, do you throw in John Cena? He's from New England. I mean, Jose Perez on a local level was fantastic. There's just all the guys from the NWA New England, a lot of the guys from Chaotic. That's a tough question, Joe. I don't know if I can come up with a solid answer.
Sure. And then when it comes to, you know, some of the other stars that you've worked with, obviously a mainstay in your group over the years, John Diamond, the Jackmaster. Let's talk about him. You know, he was a big part of your story, your career, and obviously you managed him for so many years. Let's talk about the Jackmaster.
I still stay in touch with John, but I haven't seen him in quite some time. He's down in Florida. He's got a very successful couple of different tattoo shops, motorcycles. He's doing great. Family man. John is a brother of mine, and the group that we ran with on the road, because for as much as Joe Bruin is New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame and all that, I reached out a lot going down that way too, to New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And to be able to be in a little pack for a while there of running with John Diamond, Tony DeVito, Rough House Ralph Mosca, rest in peace, Mad Dog Mike Bell, the Giant Primo Carnera, Wreaking Havoc, you know, Eddie. We ran in a pack, and we were kind of a little wild bunch. But these guys were workers. I've seen Diamond and DeVito work so many matches against big names and big stars. John had tryouts in ECW, WWE. held 30 or 40 multiple regional titles, went up against guys like Sid Vicious to Tommy Rogers, and everybody in between. He really is a guy, to me, that belongs in a Hall of Fame. He had an impact, he had longevity. He's traveled all around to work, not just in the New England and Northeast, even made his impact in Florida. And again, that crew of guys, of DeVito, Mike Bell, Primo, Roughhouse Ralph, you couldn't ask for a crazier group of tight-knit guys that, that traveled around together and held their own in the ring, whether it be ECW style, which a lot of those guys went for, or being technical side. How many guys can you say would work like a Diamond or DeVito? They could do technical all day long. They could fit in any time era. They can go hardcore. And you could say they're a little crazy around the edges, but good, genuine people who would give you the shirt off their back. John was an incredible talent for the time, in my opinion, and in the business, one of my true brothers, as that whole group of guys. I mean, we worked everywhere, NWA New Jersey, for Dennis Corluzzo, Superstars of Wrestling. That was my connection here on the East Coast. But then there comes a while, as a manager, you got to break out. And I did everything at one time to get away from New England and the Northeast. But I love John. I think he's a great worker, and he's a good man.
So if you had to pick three, who are the top three that you have managed? If you had to choose them.
Well, I had my biggest rivals were King Kong Bundy, Jake the Snake Roberts, Mick Foley, Umaga and Rikishi. Those, Jerry King Lawler, Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Those were the guys that I had been in the ring with multiple times and were my most heated rivalries. Jim Neidhart, Mick Foley, and Yokozuna paid me the biggest compliments I could ever have in my life, and they vouched for me to places like Ring of Honor, and when I was trying to go to WWE. In '94 is when I first started I sent out tapes to everybody from Jim Ross to J.J. Dillon. You saw some of that at the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, presented it to J.J., and J.J. said, I never saw this. And it's a talent of VP Productions or Talent Relations, J.J. Dillon. He signed it for me and stamped it. Yeah. I mean, it was funny. So a lot of those guys, being able to work with them. What was the original question, Joe? Because I rambled on. I apologize.
Who are your top three?
Rivals.
Well, not rivals. No, top three that you managed.
Bushwhackers would be in there as two. So I would have to say, being able to manage, one of the few times I was a face, being able to manage Umaga and Rikishi against the Haas brothers was a great moment. Being able to manage Yokozuna in a bunch of different matches and across from him was a great moment. Being able to manage Neidhart was a great moment. I mean, there's Joe, I've been in the ring and been able to manage over 30 WWE Hall of Famers. I can't think of them all offhand. Plus the young lions and the rookies, and if you want to go with independents, being able to manage Zombie, being able to manage Kurt Adonis, who turned heel as the biggest baby face, being able to work against Hacksaw Jim Duggan, the Monster Abyss, Sabu, taking over for commissioner for the NAWA for Bruno Sammartino was the biggest honor of my life. And then holding that office for 20 years until Tony Atlas became their latest commissioner, and then being in New York for the return, I believe the very first return to New York City for Bret Hart after the Montreal screw job, to where he was coming to make an appearance, and that was at the Orangetown, New York Fairgrounds. And talk about a great guy. Being in the ring with Bret Hart and being able to introduce him and talk to him, he gave every single guy in the back room, in the locker room, attention, pick their brain, take a picture. People say he's an ornery old cuss, he's bitter. You couldn't tell it by back then, that's for sure. So those are some of the highlights. And to be quite honest, no matter who I ever was allowed to manage and step in the ring with, it wasn't always about name value and how famous they were. Working with Antonio Thomas, Kevin Landry, guys like that, Johnny Heartbreaker, Kurt, Nick, Millennium Wrestling Association, Jason Knight, Acid Pro Assault. Working with all those guys was a great honor as well. Homicide and Joe Gertner, and I got to learn a lot from a lot of different people, especially the Samoans.
And you would go on to team up with the Outcast Killers against Team 3D. Take us back to that night. What are your memories from that?
Outcast Killers were a team on the rise at that point. Diablo Santiago, Oman Tortuga, they were getting a big push. They were feuding with Vic Delicious and Hale Collins, a young The Now team, the Logan brothers. And then, of course, we were lucky enough to have a series of tables matches with Bully and Devon. I think that was 05, 06, 07, that area, where they were the NWA World Tag Team Champions. And we were doing it in a series of tables matches. So that right there, and a lot of people talk about Bully Ray and Devon. Bully Ray, yeah, he's maybe rough around the edges. It tells it like it is. But one of the most professional, nicest guys I ever had a chance to work with. Worked me 3 minutes, said, Big Daddy, I want you to be in that spot, this spot, that spot. To be able to know when to come in, to take the spot, to get the heat, to put the shine on your guys. And they gave me some of the toughest bumps I ever took in my career. And again, to have it all on video, to take the what's up from the top rope, and it was a lot of fun. And the Killers, I thought they were going places. I don't know if they ended up getting out of the business, but we had a decent run in the mid-2000s, and I thought that Oman and Diablo were excellent heels and good workers. And again, you're working with guys that are legends in auditoriums or carnivals or circuses or bingo halls or high school gyms. I mean, that to us guys, it didn't get much better than that when you're in the locker room with AJ Styles and Christian Cage and Kurt Angle, and you're talking to guys like Tito Santana and Buddy Landell and the Bushwhackers and Yoko and Jake, and that right there for me, Joe, is worth the price of admission alone. I could not have anything in video, anything on tape. People could never know who I was, because for manager, it was very difficult in my era. They brought in women, they brought in TNA, sex sells, and the old school manager. I was lucky enough to make it to the mid-2000s to be able to work for some of the companies, whether it be the Spartans, whether it be O'Brien, whether it be with Dale Gagne or the Twin Turbos and World Wrestling Zone, being able to work with Terry Funk in the Hammond, Indiana Civic Center, his hometown. It took one right between the eyes and a chair shot that had me spinning for weeks. And on the same event, was able to, of all people, manage him in his debut, Josh Matthews. What a small world.
Wow. So you have done so much. I mean, you've accomplished a lot. Told just a few stories here today that have been amazing. We could certainly have you on again. What would you say is the greatest challenge in the wrestling business from your personal point of view?
Put the physicality part aside from it, because that's the biggest challenge. Even as a weekend warrior, I was booked at least a half dozen times a month. I've been booked as a manager over 100 times a year. I had joint custody of my 2 daughters, so it was tough for me to always get out there. Coming from my perspective, the biggest thing is being seen, being known, people taking a risk on you and allowing you to work for them. Because any manager or valet or somebody that's not the full-time worker, you could screw up a match really quickly. And then it takes the focus off your workers, and that's not what you're there for. You're there to give the rub to the workers and to the match as kind of like an hors d'oeuvre before the main course. The biggest challenge is staying healthy, getting booked, being away from your family, not falling into drugs and alcohol, which especially in the 90s was everywhere. Again, all these meld together. You have to have IPC skills interpersonal communications. You have to be able to commit yourself to whether you're booked or not booked, to showing up at the show, letting them see your face, going to the restaurant, the hotel, the bar, even if you're not on the show, and getting people in a social situation to where they get to know Joe Bruin. I don't know Joe Bruin, the wrestler, the champion. I know him as Joe, the guy we're having a cocktail with or breaking bread in the restaurant. They get to see you on a real level. And guys like Yoko and Neidhart and Mick and other guys who I met earlier in the WWE backstage when I wasn't in the business, he even shared his chicken wings with me. They would come into town and they would say it to Mike O'Brien, they would say it to Mike Sparta, they said it to Steve and Larry Gligorovic in the World Wrestling Zone out in Chicago, they said it to Dale Gagne, Johnny Stewart from the AWA, even Dennis Corluzzo, Frank Goodman, Pro Wrestling, Power Wrestling, Pro Wrestling USA. They would say, you know what, who do you want to work with? You know, I want to work with Big Daddy. I want to work with Big Daddy. And do you know why most of the times I think they said it? Of course, you have to hold your own when you're in the ring and provide something and not take away. But because they liked me, I believe, and was told to me as a person, they liked hanging out with me afterwards. They thought I was funny. They saw that I worked hard, that I hung up flyers, that I was breaking down the ring. I wasn't above being a ticket seller. A lot of people in my day, Joe, they would look at you like a mark, or like, you got to sell a bunch of tickets to get on the show. I don't know what world you're living in, but if you're not there to show interest in your company that's going to hire you and pay you, and you're not going to promote it or help sell tickets or hang up flyers or hang around and watch everyone else's matches or take the night to stay overnight if you could, break down the ring, what are you doing? What are you doing there? The more tickets you sold, and if you were talented, you people could say, that's a bunch of horseshit. You're selling tickets. That's the only reason why you're getting on the show. I disagree with that point of view, unless you're somebody who has absolutely no talent. You're selling the tickets to your family and friends because you're proud of the product and what you're doing and the company that you're working for. You putting asses in seats gives money to the promoter, who in turn, at least the guys that I work, gave money back to me. And if they didn't up my pay, they would pay for my hotel. What manager do you know, besides the big time, was able to travel all over this country as not a full-time worker, as a manager who took bumps, able to go to like 20 different states, have your hotel paid for, have your airfare paid for, and to have a lot of your food paid for, to where even people would say from the company, here, take my car for the day and go out with the guys. At times, and I was told not to say this, I got paid more than the guys that were doing the regular matches. What manager has done that in this industry? Very few and far between. For my level of making it, because it was never a career for me.
Sure.
I was a corrections officer, a bouncer, a bounty hunter for David Schultz. That was my career. I worked bodyguard in the music industry for LL Cool J, Slick Rick, Big Daddy Kane, Metallica, Rod Stewart, Jimmy Buffett. The list goes on and on of people that I was able to rub elbows with and work for. And it's all because I had interpersonal communications and I showed respect. Although Rikishi didn't see it that way back in the late 80s.
This is true.
And we became good friends anyway. We became lifelong buddies. But yeah, I mean, it's really important to be a part of something. And if you're not going to be a team player and it's just about you, I don't know what you're doing or how far you're going to go.
Right.
I was never above doing anything, Joe. Sweeping the floors. I don't care.
So, obviously, being a manager, going back to Mount Rushmore, who are your top 4 managers of all time? Any era?
Lou Albano, who influenced me very highly and had a chance with Sheldon Goldberg at New England Championship Wrestling. Sheldon's a great guy, another local promoter around here who's a legend who I didn't get a chance to talk about because I could talk with you, Joe, forever. Sheldon Goldberg is an incredible person. I hope he's doing well health-wise as well. I love Sheldon. And it almost clicked, it almost worked for me to be Captain Lou Albano Jr. at one time. but we never went through with the storyline. Lou wasn't always available, but I had that opportunity, almost opportunity. I'll never forget that. So Albano was a big influence on me even as a kid. So Albano, Classy Freddie Blassie, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Jim Cornette. And again, there's other guys I love, from Gary Hart to Paul Ellering. I had a chance to pick the brain of Albano, sit down and allow me to grill him. Jim Cornette, sit down with him at events and venues and allow me to grill him. Gary Hart, sit down with him at events and allow me to grill him. So just to be able to have access and don't undercut someone like a Joel Gertner or a Bill Alfonso, who I also got to work with, and they were invaluable at providing information to me, or just being able to watch them. And then independently, characters who really for their day were standout and unique. Kenny Casanova, the late great Paul Adams. I mean, Pat the Brat Piper. I mean, those guys were young. I was already in my late 30s at that point, maybe even into my 40s before I finally got out. Whether you were young or old, famous or not so famous, independent or in the major leagues, I find myself learning a lot from everybody. Being able to talk to everybody has really made me a well-rounded person. Being able to sit with Jason Knight when I'm approaching my 40s, and these were all kids, and having access to Flying Fred Curry. To be able to sit down and interview 25 years ago Flying Fred Curry, to talk about Bull Curry and talk about the days of the 50s and 60s and the territories, that stuff right there. Because like you, once I knew my managerial career was over, or because I walked away on my own terms, I got into podcasting, and I've always enjoyed doing interviews. I've been a ring announcer, I've been a play-by-play guy, I've been a color commentator guy. I try to wear all hats, and that's why I can understand enjoying what you do, because it's invaluable what you present, and in turn what you soak in. So that right there, and again, I'm rambling here, to be able to, even today in 2025, especially when he was alive before it passed, to be able to still converse on a brief moment with King Kong Bundy, Sergeant Slaughter, to this day, remembering that we worked together a couple of different times. And I said, you're going to get a receipt someday, Slaughter. Just to be able to work with these guys, Joe. I don't want to, but I could die today and be a happy man.
Yeah.
I have minimal regrets, except maybe not getting that one look, because I literally basically got thrown out of the offices at WWE in the mid-90s. I sent tapes to everybody and their brother, promo tapes. It was tough for a guy like me as a manager. I couldn't hack it, Joe. Being honest.
Well, I mean, look at all you've accomplished, though. So it doesn't,
Yes, I feel great about that.
Yeah, you can't look at it that way. It's not all about, you're still doing your thing, whether the camera is recording or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So fast forward years from now, looking back at your career, what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
That I was the most notorious, biggest, baddest, loudest professional wrestling manager in the history of the business, the independent business. Because I was wild as the character of Big Daddy, the Guardian of Chaos. In the ring, I was hated. Outside the ring, whenever I left the venue, the fans loved me, Joe, because I was a different guy. A lot of people couldn't separate the Guardian of Chaos, Big Daddy, until I got out of the ring and out of the building. I think, pretty sure I was genuinely liked by all the boys, had minimal heat, if anything, and if you ever did, you just talk to that person. We're grown men. It's really no big deal. It's professional wrestling. I would like the fans to remember me. He was a crazy SOB as a manager. He provided a lot for the guys that he worked with and the shows that he was on. Because as a manager, Joe, I put asses in seats. There's no denying that. Wherever I went, the ticket sales and the numbers don't lie. I'm fortunate that I worked, guys like Mike O'Brien, Mike Sparta gave me the biggest chances in my career. Dennis Corluzzo, and again, out west, being a lot of people gave me a lot of opportunity, and that's what I'm grateful for. And I would just remember to be that he was a part of this journey, and somehow, some way, I was a small part of this brotherhood, of this journey that we call professional wrestling, and that I was genuinely a good guy, because that's the way I see it.
Rick, thank you so much for joining us this week for the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Really appreciate you taking the time. We'll definitely have to have you back for a part 2.
I greatly appreciate it, Joe. All Access Entertainment. Don't you dare miss it.
For the Guardian of Chaos, Big Daddy, I'm Joseph Bruin, and this has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave your comments. We want to hear from you, the fans, you, the viewers, and what you thought of this episode and what you'd like to see in future